The flight attendant leaned toward the single mom and whispered.
Ma'am, other passengers are complaining about your child.
A man across the aisle didn't whisper. He said it loudly.
People like her should be sitting in business class!
A few passengers laughed. Someone started recording. The young mother sat there in silence, holding her child closer. But the man sitting beside her finally turned his head and said something that made the entire cabin go quiet. That man was me. Up until that moment, I hadn't said a single word. I had boarded the flight late and taken my seat in 14A without drawing attention. The young mother sat beside me in 14B. Her little boy, maybe 3 years old, had fallen asleep almost instantly after takeoff. She looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion you can't fake. Not messy, not careless, just tired. Across the aisle sat the businessman, expensive watch, pressed suit, the kind of passenger who acted like the plane belonged to him. He had already complained once during boarding. Then the child stirred in his sleep, just a small sound. That was enough. The businessman leaned toward the aisle and said loudly,
This is exactly why children shouldn't be allowed in business class!
Several passengers glanced up. The mother heard him, but she didn't respond. She just rubbed the child's back gently, trying to keep him asleep. A few minutes later, the boy woke up and started to whimper softly. Nothing dramatic, just the quiet cry of a tired toddler. But the businessman rolled his eyes dramatically. Then he pressed the call button. The flight attendant arrived. Before she could even speak, the man gestured toward the mother.
I paid for a peaceful flight. I didn't pay to sit next to daycare.
A couple of passengers chuckled. The mother's face flushed. I'm sorry, she whispered.
I'll try to calm him down.
But the man wasn't finished.
You shouldn't even be up here! Business class is for people who work hard enough to afford it.
That was when the phones came out. Someone in row 12 started recording. People love moments like that. Public humiliation. The mother stared down at her hands. Her son clung to her shoulder now, wide awake. She didn't argue. She didn't defend herself. She just held him tighter. The flight attendant looked uncomfortable.
Sir, I'm sure the child will settle.
Enough! I won't tolerate this! No, move her.
The entire row went quiet.
She can sit in the back with the rest of them.
The mother shook her head quickly. I paid for this seat, she said softly, but her voice was barely audible.
You? You expect us to believe that?
That was the moment I turned my head. I had been watching quietly the entire time, listening, observing. I looked directly at him.
She did pay for that seat.
The man looked at me like I was interrupting his show.
And who asked you?
He snapped. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean forward. I simply replied,
The person who approved the ticket.
He frowned.
What does that mean?
I reached into my jacket pocket slowly. The movement caught the attention of half the cabin. Then I handed the flight attendant a small card. She glanced at it. Then her eyes widened. Her posture changed instantly. The businessman noticed. What is it? He demanded. The flight attendant cleared her throat.
Sir, this passenger is on the airline's executive board.
The man blinked. I met his gaze calmly.
I review customer experience reports.
I explained.
Sometimes I do it from the air.
Silence filled the cabin. The phones that had been recording slowly lowered.
You see, I like to understand how passengers are treated when no one thinks leadership is watching.
The businessman's confidence collapsed almost instantly.
Well, I didn't know. That's the point. You weren't supposed to.
The mother beside me looked completely confused. I turned to her and smiled gently.
You're in the right seat, and your son is perfectly welcome here.
She nodded quietly. Relief washed across her face. Then I looked back at the businessman.
You asked the crew to move her. But I think the better solution
I paused.
is to move you.
The flight attendant didn't hesitate.
Sir, please gather your belongings.
His face turned red.
You're serious?
Very.
The cabin watched silently as he collected his bag. The same passengers who had laughed earlier now avoided eye contact. He was escorted toward the back of the plane, and just like that, the tension disappeared. The little boy beside me had already fallen asleep again. His mother looked at me carefully.
Thank you.
She said quietly.
You didn't have to do that.
I smiled.
Actually, making sure every passenger feels respected is exactly my job.
She nodded slowly. Outside the window, the clouds stretched endlessly across the sky. And for the rest of the flight, the cabin remained perfectly quiet. Not because someone demanded silence, but because everyone had finally remembered something simple. Respect doesn't depend on the seat you're in. It depends on the kind of person you choose to be.